the pain or how it's going to feel, you know? And so I think leaning into sadness, my biggest fear for a while was just like, how's this going to feel? Like, I'm not used to being in the space of just a lack of control and kind of just like giving into my emotions in a way. Because I feel like even I would feel tinges of sadness, but I would suppress it with something else, or I would do something else that distracted me a little bit. But completely leaning into it, which I do think is important sometimes, to actually move forward and not just stay, you know, on a cycle of like, I feel good today, but then these same issues that have been issues for the last 10 years are going to continue to come back in other ways. So I don't think, like, I'm not sure that there is a way to become an expert at sadness or at navigating all of your complex emotions, but I do understand, like, the value in it for sure.
Almost Pisces.
Or that means I'm just an Aquarius.
Okay.
But it's so funny because like almost
Pisces.
So I am at the end. I'm the 16th, and I think like 2 days later it becomes Pisces. So I am almost at the end.
So you're like a cuss baby?
Yeah, but I don't believe in that.
She's our cousin. What's up, cousin? That's funny.
But I do not believe in the stars. I call y'all the star folks. I mean, it's not that. I just feel like they're like, oh, if you're an Aquarius, you'll feel the need to breathe today. And everybody's like, oh my gosh, this is so deep. This is so me. And I'm just like, yeah.
I avoid that.
Yeah.
I very much avoid that. I'll say, yeah, this is my sign.
Exactly. I know that much. But that's all I know. Then we get to the rising and all that stuff.
Do you know that you have a lot in common with other Aquariuses?
I have a lot in common with a lot of people.
Hey, that was gangster. I got a lot in common with a lot of folks. That's funny.
But I heard that's an Aquarius. Somebody said that's an Aquarius thing that we get along with everybody. So then it's still back to the stars. But yeah, I just feel like I don't know.
That was the most gangster response.
You know, because that's what they get. Oh, this is why we connect.
This isn't the first time you've had to respond.
No, it's not.
Like, I can't talk to her sometimes.
No, I'll indulge in the stars, but I'm just saying, baby, I was supposed to be born 2 months, I think, after I was born, because I'm a twin. I love us Black folks and just these conversations. It's so important. It's so important. So thank y'all so much for having me.
Thank you for making time. Welcome back to another episode of Mental Health Monday. We have an attorney, well-rounded, well-traveled, well-versed. Tell the people who you are and what it is that you do.
That's always a hard question. All right, so my name is Chadli Pittman. I am an attorney. Technically my day-to-day job is within the healthcare and life sciences space. I went to Spelman College, shout out to Spelman, and then I went to GW for law school. And right now what I do is just living. You know, honestly, when I show up, I just feel like I'm just here. So I do me. I do like whatever that means at any given point. But I'm just out here. I like learning about the world. I like talking about the world. I will chat your ear off most of the time if you let me. So you gotta bring me back. But
she's all about the vibes.
Just the vibes. Like literally, I probably say that every day. It's just the vibes. I just go off vibes.
As an attorney, what's the value of doing research properly?
Oh, literally that is like the bread and butter of our job. It's research. Because you need to understand, again, anybody can look up a regulation or a law and read it, right? But you need to read cases to see how it's actually applied. What are some defenses that have been recognized as valid? What are some things that are not valid? What are some of the small details that hinges on whether this is applicable to this space or whatever the case may be? And so, like law with anything, there are different perspectives of the law. The same law can be interpreted differently by different circuits, different courts, and so it's just so important to get a more holistic view of whatever you're trying to learn. So you need to understand, you need to know what you don't know and understand any vulnerabilities in anything that you are looking into.
Sweet.
I was on another one of my rants. This time I was talking about, because I just watched the vice presidential debate, and they were talking about children and shooting up schools. And, you know, it's interesting, especially with the VP candidates, their views are not that different. And the debate was interesting only because it was very civil, and that was kind of a comment that a lot of people had. And it's sad that a civil, like this, politics is not meant to be a zoo. They're not meant to be talking about eating cats and dogs, you know, and arguing about silly things, you know. And so it's sad that like an actual civil proceeding is so surprising to us. But anyways, they were talking about school shootings, and to me, it's a deeply troubling issue, but I think it's more troubling because a lot of times the way that we look at school shootings and school shooters, it shows a lot about who we think of who they are. And so obviously, you know, school shootings are mostly done by white children in rural areas. And the fact that it is not treated as an issue, as big of an issue as it actually is, that children cannot go to school to get an education and know that they're going to come home, is a problem. And if it was black children doing it, it would not be a problem. And so I think at the same time, I am doing a pro bono case representing some children. And so I go to their school, and I went to their school for the first time that week as well. Girl, I was like going through airport security. Like it was crazy. You know, and thinking, so I asked them, I said, do the kids have to go through this every day? And they said, yes. These are not the kids that are shooting at schools. And so imagine if those children had to go through metal detectors and be treated like they are preparing to be criminals.
Cocoa butter?
Oh, thank you.
I'm good.
Continue.
But imagine if those children had to go through all that. They don't, right? And how much easier is it to be able to bring what you want in school, to be able to access your phone if you need to speak to your parent about something, access like all of those things. And so it's like such a different experience with schooling, but also the things that you're saying, the reasons that you're saying that these kids are going through this, these are not the kids who are shooting. So why are they going through all this? These are not the kids. And it's showing that we naturally think that white children are pure, they are less likely to be violent, they are less disruptive, and that's actually statistically not true. And on the opposite coin, it's saying that we naturally think black children, just by being black, are more likely to be dangerous, which is why they have all these student resource officers that are throwing them to the ground like they are animals, that you are more likely to be doing something you're not supposed to be doing. And imagine from a young age, always society interacting with you, like, what are you doing? We need to look over here. We need to surveil you. What are you doing? What are you doing? You're capable of doing something bad all the time. You know, what does it do for your own sense of self as you're developing it? Because this is being poured into you way before you can even conceptualize like any of these messages, you know? But the thing with children is just because they can't put language to what they're learning doesn't mean they're not learning it. They are learning their place in society. And so I think when they were just talking about, we really don't know what to do with, you know, the school shootings and these white children bringing assault rifles into schools, but y'all are so quick to put all these surveillance mechanisms in black schools and, you know, act like, I mean, you will bring the National Guard out for some black children. You know, it was really frustrating to me. And, you know, it's a bipartisan thing. So, like I said, their views aren't that different. The Republicans said the same things. The Democrats said the same thing. These are bigger issues of our society and of thinking that black is bad and black is scary and black is more likely to be doing something criminal. And white, even if you are those things, we can take you out after you have just committed. We can bring you out alive. We're going to take you to Wendy's or McDonald's, make sure you eat first. Like, really?
So, would you mind saying what school it was that you went to?
It is, I think, Theodore Roosevelt. And it's crazy because the school is so nice. Like, inside it looks like High School Musical. It is so nice. But it is a minority school for the most part. The infrastructure is nice, but every single door you have to go through security, and when you leave, you can't come back. And they were explaining to me some of the rules, and I was just like, even from a standpoint of going to the doctor, or like, you know, things that happen when you're in high school, you're like, it just seems so inefficient. You know?
You gotta get a doctor's note just to, even if they send you home from school, you gotta get a doctor's note to come back.
To get back in.
Which is crazy.
Or like after a certain time, security is done. I think they said around like 12:30 or 1, and you can't come back to school because the security people are not like surveilling people anymore. They have a machine and they have people that's the thing too. That clearly the machine is not enough because then you gotta spread them and like,
So that's a high school. I went to a middle school where it was the same thing. I'm like, the youngest kid that you are doing this to is 10 years old or 9 years old, right? And so, like you said, those messages are being embedded early on, so that it's not surprising when he thinks all he has to do, or his only option, is drug dealing, or he's expecting to end up in prison.
Yeah, and even aside from a psychological standpoint, going back to how everything fits together from a legal standpoint. So the Constitution, there are certain search and seizure rules. There are certain things that, like, for example, when you question a child, you have to warn a child, for example, before they are, if you are in custody, which means you can't move as you want to or whatever, you're supposed to give somebody their warnings and, speak to them in a certain way, give them specific warnings. In schools, you don't have to do that, right? So, but there are school resource officers, who a lot of them are police officers, who are also hired by the school. They can do whatever. They can search these kids' lockers. They can ask kids about things and have conversations about things that the child could incriminate themselves. They can do all that because it's within a school system that literally outside the school they would be able to do to kids. And so it is actually these places having these officers, you are more likely to be criminalized for something. And this is not even talking about the ones that are like wrestling them down and fighting, but just in general, like if they search and they find whatever they find. But in the real world, actually, you are entitled to a certain amount of privacy that you probably would not have been able to just freely search a child's.
And certainly as a minor, you need a parent present before you can do anything. You can't sign your name. You can't agree to a contract. You can't do anything
in the real world
present, but in the school they have no rights.
Exactly. So being in this space where you don't have rights, where you're not told what your statements will be used for, and your statements can be used against you, and you're talking to a police officer who, again, outside of here would not be able to do this. They would have to give you certain warnings, right? Like once you're under custodial arrest, they would have to do those things, but in the school system they don't. You have these children who are more likely to, be found having done whatever. And kids are kids, like sometimes everything that they do is not harmful, but these kids are more likely to be criminalized for something just from having you in their schools. And again, school resource officers were put into schools as a response to desegregation or to integration. So they started in Detroit, I believe, and basically it was because white parents were scared about their children being around black kids, and so white people trusted the police, and so they said, okay, the only way that we will let our children continue to go here is if there are police around that will ease our fears about these wild monkey black children, because this is what they're thinking at the time, And so, like, thinking of the history of all of it, it was never to keep us safe. It was never to do any of that stuff. Like, it was always treating us as crazy animals who are unpredictable. We don't know what you're going to do, and so we are bracing for impact for everyone else.
But time and time again, it's been the white people who have shown that they are the
and that's what I'm saying.
Can't be trusted.
But they don't put them in. It's always in urban minority neighborhoods. That's where you find them. They're not in the rural places.
Who was spitting at Ruby Bridges when she was a kindergartner going to a desegregated school?
That's what I'm saying.
It was the white people. It wasn't the black people.
And the resource officers probably sat there and just watched and encouraged it because they thought the same thing. Like, oh yeah, we're keeping you and your little white children safe from them because they're a threat. So none of it was for us.
Even when you think about the titles of resource officer, you think that title would be there to protect the kids, and it's like, no, it's actually to protect the establishment first, then the white kids second, and then whoever else is left is who we're taking care of. That's sad.
It's sad.
Yeah.
But it's a form of policing, which wasn't for us either. And so you can rename a police officer. These are the same officers back in the times of slavery who were hunting people down. That's how, I don't think there's any states that still allow citizens arrest, but that's what citizens arrest is for. If you are a white person, you see a runaway slave, we are giving you our authority to arrest them and hold them down yourself.
Well, isn't that stand your ground?
No, stand your ground is completely different. So stand your ground means there's castle doctrine and stand your ground. Castle doctrine is your house. So if somebody comes to your house, you're allowed to use deadly force. Stand your ground is different in different states, but like Florida, for example, stand your ground means like when you're out and somebody is posing a deadly threat to you, you can use it back. Or you can, so castle doctrine is more of property. Like if somebody, you have to be in a home. Stand your ground is like, you could be out and you still have a right to not retreat, because that's kind of the opposite. Is normally you have a duty to retreat and not to escalate a situation to deadly force, but stand your ground states you can. But again, that is very racialized.
Yeah, the first time I heard stand your ground was Trayvon Martin.
Of course.
Right? George Zimmerman was standing his ground, but Trayvon Martin was going the opposite direction. So, was he actually convicted of murder or?
He was convicted of something, and that's where stand your ground comes in. So murder requires premeditation most of the time. And whereas manslaughter can be like if you're in the heat of a moment and we're fighting and I didn't really plan to kill you, but I ended up killing you, that's a lesser charge than like a first degree murder. And so I think he got some form of manslaughter. So basically they acknowledged that even though he was walking away, because, and that's where the stand your ground comes in, but he was posing a threat and George Zimmerman was afraid. And so it was in the height of the moment he killed him. But again, that's ridiculous. Like, how are we in the heat of the moment? And normally the heat of the moment is like, did you have time to de-escalate? Was there a time where we had to cool off or whatever the case may be, which there was. And, you know, it's just, there are so many aspects of Trayvon Martin's death, like, so many deaths that are awful, not only because of what happened, but also with people scrutinizing their behavior and saying what they should have done. We're human beings. So I hate it when we tell little kids, I understand why parents have to do it, but when we tell little kids they're not allowed to get angry when someone is doing this or when someone's bullying them or picking on them, because a part of it is still stripping our humanity from us, you know? When white people are calling you all types of stuff and spitting on you and stuff and you're just not supposed to do anything, that is stripping us of our humanity. They set stuff on fire after football games, you know, but we can't act, we can never be angry, we can never be any of these things, and it just sucks that, like, obviously it's a survival mechanism, but it's just so sad that, like, I'm teaching my child that their human emotions they need to disconnect from because of the color of their skin.
I think a lot of that exists though in black parenting in general. Like, you're not allowed to be angry at your parent. It's like, are you kidding me?
I will say I think that it's getting better. And so I am trying to, as I'm getting older, find grace for our parents because, you know, we have a lot of resources that they didn't have, and it's really easier said than done because sometimes I'd be like, ooh, girl. But, you know, even the conversations about mental health are so much more prevalent in our generation than they were in our parents' generation. And the conversation behind it, the representation behind it. You know, now there are not only mental health professionals that are accessible and people have insurance and ways to get them and insurance is covering it, you know, and it's understanding that it's actually a part of health the same way any other part of your body needs to be serviced or treated. But also there are black men who are speaking up about it now, right? Black women. So not only do we see it happening, but we see people who look like us who are taking their mental health seriously, and they're not weird, they're not like all of these stereotypes of what people think, they're not crazy, right? Like, oh, well, they need it, but I don't need it, you know? And so it's a blessing to be able to grow up in a time where we can talk about it, and like, it's not weird. I don't feel like, oh my gosh, she thinks I'm crazy. It's okay because it's normal. And a lot of them just didn't have that. But with that being said, I think, especially for our parents' generation, change is difficult. But I will say some of them are in a space where it is like grandparents' generation, if they gone, they gone. You know, like you didn't have however many years. But but going back to that, I think about how our parents grew up. They couldn't even talk to their parents at all. You know, talk to adults at all. And so, like, I feel like a lot of our parents have done a little bit better with us. It's still, like, dependent, especially if you're in the South or whatever, like, you know, it's still some things that you're not supposed to say. You're not supposed to tell them that they made mistakes when, you know, with you, or that they ever hurt you, or whatever the case may be. But I do think we are moving in the right direction. And I'm so excited to see like movies like Inside Out coming out, where children are growing up and knowing what anxiety is and seeing what an anxiety attack is and knowing that it's normal and knowing that it can happen to all of us, and you know, understanding themes, even if they can't put words to it, again, about like, okay, there are so many complex parts of my personality and all of them are okay, and I need to learn how to accept all the parts of me, and you know, all those things. I think it's so special, and I can't wait to see the changes that they will make just based on all of that. They're exposed to so much more is normalized to them. And I think that they will continue, because what are they, Gen Z? Gen Z don't play, child. I saw something on Twitter, and it's true, they are calling the police on all the pedophile uncles that weren't, you know, like in prior generations, people might have
Yeah.
said, you need to protect this person, or we all like turn it ahead. They're not doing that anymore. And I think that that is so brave, and I think that is so wonderful, and I think that it is a reflection of all that they get to learn
Yeah.
and conversations that they get to have that like we didn't, and our parents definitely didn't, and our grandparents sure didn't. So like, you know, it's amazing.
What's your perspective when it comes to the law and mental health?
The law.
And mental.
Yeah, like if you took all right, so this is what mental health is, but I feel when it comes to people either getting help or receiving advice from the proper people, sometimes the law helps and sometimes the law gets in the way.
So I think, from a legal standpoint, the law actually should not overlap with mental health too much. I mean, yeah, you know, I think of like the criminal justice system, for example, but even that is not like, when there are, for example, a lot of prisons, and like depending on what states you go to, a lot of prisons are offering mental health services and things of that sort. So, you know, I think that that's good. But I think the law is interesting because it tells you how things should be. And once you are a human being living in the world, you understand that things don't always work that way. But I think the law actually does help protect in some ways, because the law tells insurers what they can and can't deny you for. You know, like the law, or it wasn't really the law, it was more of like three branches of government. So not necessarily the law, but the government in general is giving things like, you know, when Obamacare became a thing, so that more people could have health care, so that they could be covered, you know, because if I don't even have money to eat, why am I use my last $30 to go to a therapist?
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense, you know. And so I think that there were ways that the law helps create a mechanism for people to get help. But it's de facto and de jure, right? So you have the laws. Yes. So basically saying that there are certain things, there can be laws, right? And then it's like how it's actually experienced. So, and there are laws that are written, you know, that are passed, and then there are things, basically the experience of things. And so, for example, de facto versus de jure segregation. So, you know, what was it? Prior to the 60s, you could actually discriminate in a way that after you could not, right? But people were still discriminating, and they, you know, schools were not integrating, or there was segregation, separate but equal, but that was not equal, of course, like all of those things. So there's always a period of time where you outlaw something, but your actual experiences, or there are other ways to institutionalize these discriminative patterns, or all of that, to continue to be pervasive. So I think with that being said, right, for example, you are not legally allowed to fire people for certain things, right? You can't fire a woman because she's having a picnic, right? But you can fire her because she was out too long, and she was out too long because she had a baby. So it's just like, okay, technically you can't fire somebody for this, but in practice, you can, kind of.
Yeah,
and so I think the law, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that can be a problem with the law. I think that as there's more representation in the law, we are addressing those problems more, and those loopholes of problems. But yeah, I don't, ideally the law would be something that protects people's rights and equalizes people's right to try to get help, but it doesn't always work that way.
Yeah, the reason I asked this question is last night, these things that happen to me are never scheduled. This
Of
young
course.
lady came to me and she was telling me about her brother and how he passed away by suicide, right? And this is like the last 5 to 10 minutes before the establishment shuts down. She's opening up to me a little bit, and I'm like, well, you know, I do this, that, and the third. And then she told me her story, which was her brother's story.
You're at work.
I'm at work. And we've had this conversation about being at work when this happens.
Yeah.
So her first thought in the conversation was, I wish the therapist could have told me everything that my brother was going through, so we could have done a better job. And I said, yeah, but in order to do that, that also means that the therapist needs to betray the trust that they've built up with their client. And once they cross that line and do that, that therapist may not be able to go back to your brother who was the client when they were alive to help them out more.
Anyways.
Because they've now sacrificed the trust to give you guys the full context of what's going on outside of he needs help and it's an emergency, which is technically the same as saying to the family, you guys need to do everything you can to keep him alive and here. So then when the word liability comes into play, which happens quite often, I always wonder how many businesses and people either use the word liability too much or how much liability is actually structurally in everything that keeps people from doing more than people think would help. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's hard. Because I think, like, obviously from a legal standpoint, you can be liable, but at the same time, you know, most therapists will tell you, I'm not going to say anything unless, and this is something that they're supposed to say before, unless you are going to hurt yourself or somebody else.
Yeah.
So if the therapist did understand that this person was going to hurt themselves, then they did have a duty to intervene. But what that intervention looks like is hard, and that goes back to kind of the law does not write how to do it. You know, it's just, this is the law. So how? You know, it can't write something or guidelines to every situation that you're going to deal with. Some of it is a judgment call. And you do the best you can, I guess, to make yourself, to insulate yourself the most from, but I just don't think that there is, yeah, that's rough. But I think that unfortunately, I think of the other side where that's not a rule, right? And like you said, then there's no trust between therapists and their clients. They wouldn't say anything. Like, what is even the purpose if I feel like you can go and tell whatever, you know? Because a lot of times I'm in this space because I need someone to talk to who I can trust, who won't go and tell my business or whatever. And so without this law that you're not supposed to, or this duty to confidentiality, then I think the whole structure will fall apart. But there are some problems. There are definitely some issues within, because I even feel like, I'm not a therapist, but differentiating between someone who, like, you know, I know they say, like, you have to ask if someone has a plan, or like all of those things, right? To differentiate between, a lot of people have thought about killing themselves, you know? And so how do I know that you are really going to go through with it? Like, and I guess there are probing questions to ask, but that's just such a difficult, it's a difficult space to be in.
Yeah, it is. But
and
then,
it's rough.
In the world we live in, it's a normalized
It
thing
is.
also. So even if it's a difficult thing for people to talk about, you avoiding the topic doesn't mean the topic isn't progressing in someone's head.
Right, yeah.
You know what I think is important, and I find it difficult to say, but it has been something that I've thought about for a while. I was watching this video on Twitter. This was a couple years ago, and someone was attempting suicide, and he jumped from a building, and the fire department was able to, they were speaking to him before, trying to get him to come down. He didn't want to come down. The fire department was able to get to the floor under him and literally caught him and brought him in. Oh, he was pissed. And it was interesting to watch because, you know, everyone's like, it's a miracle you're meant to be here. And apparently his issues had to do with his lack of feeling autonomy in our world, and how much of that is us doing the same thing as taking someone's autonomy. And I'm not saying that, like, obviously any of us who have ever loved someone, you don't just let them die, right? But also it's difficult because some people really don't want to be here, and now, like, you are going to be institutionalized somewhere. Life is probably going to go downhill from here for a while before it gets better. Any autonomy you had before it's going to be worse now. You know, like, people are going to be surveilling you all the time. People are going to, and like, I think that it's important. You talk to people about wanting to be here. You try to make things better for them. But I think that there is a bigger issue with us forcing people to be here. We're not giving them health care. If they're poor, we're not feeding them. We're not putting structures in place that make life less painful for them. And so I think it's so important, as we are trying to convince people to be here, to give them something to be here for too, you know? And that's where, like, I think things like healthcare or Obamacare or, you know, affordable healthcare are so important. But also, let's talk about the rest of the structures, you know? I always say for the pro-life folks, okay, so you want these babies to be born, what you gonna do when they're here? Are you gonna criminalize these little kids? Because guess what? If their parents can't have abortions, that means people who don't want kids are having kids. And kids grow up knowing that they're not wanted to be here. And what does that do to them psychologically? But also, women who can't even afford to take care of themselves are now having these babies who are growing up stealing and doing these things because that's the only way they can survive. And for me, the criminal justice system does not acknowledge that, right?
Yeah.
These are people who came from slave wealth and things like that, who never had to make these decisions of, do I rob somebody or do I starve?
Yeah.
And not only, I am 5 years old, I can barely read, I can speak, but I rob, and I don't do it just for me. I have 2 children. I'm a child, but I have 2 other children to take care of, 2 siblings, and my parent is strung out on drugs, and so I have to take care of them too, you know?
And robbery is my 9 to 5.
And that robbery is my 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And you know, and so I think there are so many things, as we are begging people to be here, we need to be able to offer them in exchange.
Yeah, and then I think the other side of that coin from our original point is, for the guy that jumped off the building, when it comes to autonomy, my work, which Jory has been a great part of, shout out to you, is how long were the people in pain, right? So us as a society, and when I say society, I don't just mean the public eye, I also mean family members and friends. We make the mistake of, well, we need to love them and come around them because they're in pain now. And not a lot of people are willing to ask and take the journey with that person to figure out, well, how long were they in pain for? Where did it start? If I'm a part of the source of where it started, what do I need to change, or who do I need to be in order to help and promote that person wanting to see tomorrow? And outside of just that, how much of this is also not my responsibility? Because the person who's in pain, they may feel guilt or burden from what everyone thinks about them, and that doesn't really help towards their process of getting and finding better and wanting to see tomorrow. Because if me seeing tomorrow means I now have to deal with the guilt of every single person around me, you're technically giving me more than an inclination to want to go back to my choice, which was the original point that finally made everybody care.
Yeah, you feel like a burden. Sometimes you feel like you have to perform as being okay, but then even if you don't, like, no one wants to be the Eeyore of the group. Like, I think it was you I was talking to about Inside Out again, and I was like, the first sadness was just getting on my nerves so bad in the first movie. And I had to stop and think, why is that? I'm like, she's just always down, she's always like put all of these, you know, like, and I think that came from someone who had to learn to just push forward anyways, you know, to not bring everyone else down, to not ruin everybody else's time. But that's heavy too, you know. But it's also heavy to be vulnerable enough to be sad around people, to not know how, if you were going to talk to me again tomorrow, because yes, I'm pouring out my heart to you and I'm telling you I'm not okay, but it might be too much for you, you know. And that's the difficult part too. It's like half of us are hanging on by a thread. And so sometimes you will meet people who you cry out to help for, and they can't help you because they can't carry you, because they can barely carry themselves right now. And so, you know, it's so difficult. It is so difficult to be a loved one of someone who is going through it, because boundaries, it's okay to have boundaries too. It just is all hard. It's really, really difficult, and I don't think that I try to have grace with obviously the person going through it, but also family members and stuff too. Now there are some people who is just like, okay, you just make everything worse and you okay. But there's none of us know what to do, you know? Like, some people, like friends who pull up on them. If I haven't heard from you, I'm gonna pull up at your house to make sure you're good. Some people, that upsets them so bad. I was talking to one of my line sisters, and she was saying, and it's funny because she is a pull-up friend, and she hates it when people do that to her. Like, she feels like, if I don't want to talk and you do that, you're bulldozing my boundaries. And so, like, no one knows how to show up. But I think that it is something that we, and you know, now it's the whole check on your strong friends, or like, you know, when Chadwick passed away, or when people who are sick, well, you never know, be kind to people because you never know what they're going through.
That was like 48 hours.
Like, literally 48 hours before y'all making fun of somebody else, you know?
You guys went right back to it because that's the status quo. And like, you know, to build a habit, when folks feel sad or when something happens, and I say this often, I think you may have heard me say this, I try to figure out ways to not make the same mistakes in different parts of my life, because it just looks different when you're doing it. But it's like, no, that's the same mistake. You just did it over here, so it feels different. But it's like, nah, that's what you did 2 weeks ago when you were inside the bagel shop. Another bagel reference. When you were inside that bagel shop, and it's like, nah, you can't do that. And anytime I do that, before the mistake happens or before I'm about to do it, I think to myself, didn't we do this in a different place at a different time? It's like, Consistency showing up everywhere. So
and accountability though, and that's hard too. I think when we have to be accountable with ourselves, because we can easily let ourselves off the hook.
I like letting myself do whatever I want to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And especially if you feel like in no other space of your life are you able to do what you want to do, whether it's like at work, I don't feel like being here, but I have to do this, I have to produce, I have to. Sometimes we feel like, okay, let me just let myself do whatever because this is my way of letting myself be human. Right? And so how is it like, okay, I want to let myself off the hook and just eat what I want, and I don't feel like exercise, I don't feel like doing these things, cool, but what part does it feel like, no, out of love for myself, I need to be accountable, right? Out of love for myself, I need to be disciplined because this is the only way I'm going to get through. And that's hard to do too sometimes. Because sometimes it's like, actually, my whole life I have strived for perfection and I've been so hard on myself. And so now I want to just be kind to myself. But is kindness really a lack of accountability? Like, is self-love really saying, well, I'm going to just let myself do whatever I want, be with whomever I want, be whoever I want? No, because you're really the only person who is harmed from that. But I think if we want to tell ourselves, oh, well, this is different because this is this, we can talk ourselves out of it, but it's like, at the end of the day, you're only harming yourself. And so
I feel like everything's good in moderation. And so, like, yeah, you don't have to, like, go totally to the left. Like, oh, I'm letting myself go completely. But you should give yourself grace. Like, hey, you know, for 10 years straight, I worked out every single day. For this week, I'm not going to work out. Like, that's okay. Or I'm going to have these cookies or this cupcake because I eat salads all the time. Like, it's fine to have, like, to create that balance in your life, because I do think that is healthy.
I think it's hard. People becoming aware of other people's moderations too, because I think your moderation really is dictated by what you've gone through and what you've been allowed to do by the people around you. Because, like, remember, you know, for me, I'm always battling that little internal dialogue that comes from my mom's voice. Right. Not really my dad's voice, but my mom's voice. And it's like, she's not really saying it, but her 2007 still lives in my head. I'm like, no, you gotta go sit down. You're chilling now. And now I'm dealing with 2024 her from the conversations, and the reason she knows, hey, we don't get on the phone much, is you can't help yourself, but I have to help you help me if I want you in my life. And and when that pops out, it pops out shows niggas.
Sometimes you gotta pop out and show niggas.
And when it came to that young lady, when she was, I think because of my work, I have a certain amount of grit where I don't tell people, hey, shut that shit up, right? Because I care about your pain and your story, but I think too many people are in a rush to give. If someone's listening, you need to hear 100% of my story.
Right,
And it's like, no, I want to, A, you're at a bar, you're drunk, right? Let's just start there, right? But B, you found someone who cares about a part of your pain that you may not feel is being acknowledged in a lot of parts of your life. So I tell folks, I'm willing to hear about what you've gone through, but the pain you've gone through is the only story you have to tell. So then after that, when she was telling me the story and how she lost her brother and that the family knew and the therapist said he needs to get more help than what the therapist could provide, that's when the conversation of, well, we wish the therapist could have told us more. And I thought it was over, and she was like, you know, sorry for dumping. I was like, no, that's not dumping, that is the story. I said, dumping is when you cross over and you start telling me about your aunt now after your brother and how she passed and the fashion, how everything happened. And I'm like, we are 5 minutes to 10 minutes deep into our new relationship.
She did that?
She did that. And I said exactly what I just said to her. With this hand coming out, you can't do that. I was like, this is where you're crossing into dumping before I've asked or said, I'm okay with what you're telling me. And it's the end of my shift at work.
That's literally a stop sign.
Yeah. And I told her, I was like, I'd love to talk to you about that later in a different capacity. But first check out the work that we're doing and what that impact looks like, because she does work for a nonprofit. And I told her, I was like, I actually do work for a nonprofit. Shout out to Raising Razors. Right? And I was like, you know, what's disappointing about being a for-profit organization that's made so much impact is she told me the stories about the nonprofit she works for, how the budget's being spent, and she is someone that works for the nonprofit, wonders why aren't we spending money on the thing that we're working on, and why are we spending so much money on overhead and trips and all these other things? That's not what the mission of the company is, nonprofit-wise. And I was like, that's a good start. She's like, what do you mean? I was like, You need to be uncomfortable. You need to ask these questions. You need to find the other people in the organizations that are asking these questions. And you guys need to question the people at the top and wonder, how do you bring change without losing your jobs? Because after you bring that change, there's going to be another change that you notice needs to happen, because what you're seeing in the nonprofit organization that you're working with is that's what the foundation is built on, and you have to change the foundation in order for the policies and everything to catch up to what it's actually supposed to
do.
Yeah.
I want to go back to, you said when you saw Inside Out, the first one, you were annoyed by sadness. How's your relationship with sadness grown since that movie came out in 2015, I think?
The character or the feeling?
The feeling.
Oh. She's a second one, right? It has, I mean, I feel like even when I was watching it, it made me question myself and like, okay, well, why? You know, I'm very much of a why person. Not saying I get everything right, but I am one of those people who is pretty self-aware and pretty introspective. And so I think that like a lot of us still don't know how to be sad. We don't know how to grieve. We don't know how to, or not how to do it, but to what extent to let ourselves lean into it, you know? And I still feel like sometimes I don't fully lean in, but not by choice. I think I've just never been able to. I think I've always had something else that I had to keep going for, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that it was good in a way, you know, because sometimes it kept me in a way having to continue to be here when otherwise I just would have quit. And so, but I think that I'm still learning how to process sadness. I feel it and I can acknowledge it, and I don't think that I was ever like, oh, I never get sad. You know, I was never a toxic positivity person, because I think that that's annoying too. And I think that that was a theme too. Like Joy was like, nobody ever be sad, everything's always good. And I think she had to learn like that's not realistic either,
right,
you know? But I think that it's difficult because to me, it feels like an emotion that I can't control as much as I can control other emotions. Like it's painful in a way that I feel like I can't do anything to make the pain stop. Because sometimes you just have to feel things. But I'm like one of those people too. Like I don't, you know, like if you break a bone or something, like I'd rather not. Like, you know, and I guess everybody'd rather not. But like I think I'm most scared of like the pain or how it's going to feel, you know. And so I think leaning into sadness, my biggest fear for a while was just like, how's this gonna feel? Like I'm not used to being in the space of just a lack of control and kind of just like giving into my emotions in a way. Because I feel like even I would feel tinges of sadness, but I would suppress it with something else, or I would do something else that distracted me a little bit. But completely leaning into it, which I do think is important sometimes, to actually move forward and not just stay, you know, on a cycle of like I feel good today, but then these same issues that have been issues for the last 10 years are going to continue to come back in other ways. Yeah, so I don't think, like, I'm not sure that there is a way to become an expert at sadness or at navigating all of your complex emotions, but I do understand, like, the value in it for sure. And I encourage other people, like, I'm always like, oh, it's okay to be sad. Like, it's okay, girl. Like, if you're not feeling it today or, like, whatever. And so I think I also had to learn how to give that grace to myself, too. Because I've always been like that. You know, like, sadness got on my nerves to me. But I would never be like, if that was the actual person being all sad and Eeyore like that. I know some people like that. And, like, I would never be like, get it together, you know? Or be mean. I would handle it delicately. And so I think I had to learn how to not be frustrated with my own sadness when it came. And to try to handle it delicately as well.
You have more empathy for others than you do for yourself.
I think so, only because ever since I was a little girl, I was the fixer in my family.
Wait, was that a statement or a question?
Go. She was about to.
I was gonna say that's a hell of a statement. Now go ahead.
I mean, it was
the inflection gave me questions, but like
it was an observation. It was a rhetorical question.
Okay, all right, that was amazing.
But she was about to get into it.
I think ever since I was a child, I was the fixer. My mom's a single mother of twins, and she dealt with her own mental health struggles when I was growing up, and I was always the one to make everybody be okay, you know. And that was just always my role. And so in a way, I felt like no matter what, I know I'm strong enough to be okay. Because I haven't been through so much, I know. But I know a lot of people are not. You know, and so I felt a lack of control over other people's emotions, which is why I think I had more empathy for them. Because I don't know what you are strong enough to get through, what I wasn't allowed to break. I wasn't allowed to do any of those things. And I think that came with its own trauma. But I think I know I will be okay all the time. And I don't know that about other people. And I notice the thing that frustrates me the most is when I feel like I can't fix something. Because I feel like I almost connected that with my purpose. Like, I can make whatever you're going through, you talk to me about it, I'm going to help you find a solution. And I take it on. But then I learned, like, I actually take other people's problems on. Like, I could be having a fine day. If you're having a bad day, now I, like, actually internally having a bad day too.
Yeah.
And that wasn't healthy. I realized I was a little codependent with people and their sadness and things of that sort. But I did always have more empathy for others because I just wanted them to be okay. Because if they were okay, I was going to be okay. But I didn't feel like I could be okay unless they were okay. And that was the whole codependent aspect that I don't feel like I ever chose. It was just kind of what I learned. Like, if my mom's crying, I can't be happy. Like, even as an adult, I feel like there are ways where I'm just like, well, until she finds this, like, when I talk to my mom and she's just done something really fun or she's having a good day, like, there is a special, it doesn't matter what's going on in my life, I feel peace. I can sleep better. But she was having a problem with her neighbor, for example, and like things like that, I notice I'm agitated. It doesn't matter what day mine was. And it's just like, she's going through this, and for a while, even now, I deal with, like, I can't be happy when the people that I love are not happy. And that's a kind of scary place to be in, but my empathy kind of helps in that. Like, okay, well, how can we make you happy?
Right.
Yeah. So
is that a double-edged sword?
It is definitely.
I was gonna say that because some people just are never gonna be happy. So
and I felt in bondage because of it. Because there are some people who will never be happy. And like going back to what you were saying earlier, it's difficult because a lot of us do have sad stories, right? But so many people use that as to, this is why I am the way I am. Instead of, this happened to me and I deserve, for my own love for myself, I want to get better and I want to experience better times. Some of them have just given up, and they want you to understand why they're this way, but they don't want to get better. And those types of people, I think, have always been the most difficult for me to deal with because, like, I'm begging you to do better, but if you won't, you won't, and now we both are feeling pain. So definitely a double-edged sword, and a double-edged sword because, those same people that I took on their problems like my own, they will not do the same for me.
Right.
And sometimes, it hurts, but that's boundaries. People will say we are most responsible for taking care of ourselves. It's not their fault that I always bulldoze my boundaries and make their problems my problems. Like, that's a me problem.
Is it boundaries or insensitivity? Like,
well, it's a spectrum. Everything is never black and white. So there are some people who are completely insensitive and selfish and users.
Yeah.
But I think that in a perfectly healthy world, I do too much sometimes. It's not my responsibility for others. And expecting people to show up the same way that I should have never showed up for in the first place, that I have thrown away everything that I had to do, really harmed myself so I could hurt you in a way that people are not going to do, because most people's first priority is themselves, which is not a bad thing in a vacuum. That's not a bad thing. And so it kind of was like, damn, like, two things can be true. Yes, y'all won't do for me what I'm doing for you, and should I be doing it either? Because, like, this is a decision that I made. You didn't put a gun to my head and make me do it. I decided to bulldoze my boundaries to help you. I decided to take on your problems like they're mine, and that was a decision that I have to live with, but other people will not do that, and they maybe shouldn't,
Yeah, that wasn't something that I learned until I was in my 30s. But I used to always get disappointed. Like, so
disappointed.
And then you feel anger, sadness, bitterness, and then I would just cut people off because like, oh no, you're not really my friend. But no, maybe they just don't even have the capacity to be the type of friend that
you need. Also, I think people like us, it's hard for us because a lot of times I've had a lot of friends who, when they were going through it, they knew they could call me all the time and did, but when life got better, I didn't hear from them as much. And I said, what is it in me that needs to be the superhero that actually does better and can always be with someone when they're going through it? And I felt, and as I was doing some self-reflection, I said, that's my need to be needed. They need me the most in these spaces and time. And when they don't need me as much, they don't reach out as much, I don't, because I feel like, well, when you were sad, you called all the time and stuff. but you don't need, and so for me it felt like using again. But also, what part of me sought out people that were in crisis and could be their person, their one person that they could depend on if there was nobody else that showed up for them. And I think that's again a good thing to be, but you have to show people boundaries, and you have to show people, like, if people don't want you in the good times and only see you as that person that can get you through the bad, it's okay for you to, I mean, abandon is crazy to me. But I mean, again, your own boundaries of what makes you feel good. Nobody wants to feel used. And so I have to say, okay, you know, if my value to you is what I can provide you when you're not okay, but I don't get to experience the good parts with you, like, I don't really, that's
not a healthy relationship.
Exactly, that's giving me anything either. And so I don't want to just leave you in the wilderness, but I'm taking a step back in general, and that means don't call me when you and him break up and you need friends again, or, you know, when you're going through something else, or when your other friends who you thought were so much fun don't have your back. Don't call me then.
Yeah, I actually have a similar story to that. Don't call me when he breaks up with you. I forgot I know which friend it's. Damn, that was quick. Anyway, so I told her that she needed to start letting me know about the good parts of her relationship and not the bad parts of her relationship, because what that was starting to do is the person who she was dating, who I knew, I was starting to have this picture of them painted. And because I wasn't reinforced by the good things they may do, the little things that they may do, I was just left with this image of this person that left me wondering, how exactly did you guys get together? And why are you still together?
Why are you, if
this person is so bad and it's so annoying and it's so I don't know if that's the right word, of joy, then why do you guys live together and you let this person do this to you? And how, in God's name, are you looking forward to being with this person every day? And when I came to the realization, I'm only getting a part of the relationship, I said, look, either you're going to have to let me know what the whole relationship is, or you have to just stop asking me for advice and just leave it at that. Because I was like, you know, as a friend, you take away from the ability for me to actually be honest with you about your relationship, if that's the only part that I'm hearing about. And if I'm only your friend when things are hard, or only your friend when you need someone to be on your side when it comes to who you're dating, that's not a good or real friendship. It's void of a lot of different things. And I'm not talking about the happy hours going out for lunch and catching up about what I'm doing. I can't actually be your friend and give you valid advice because I barely see the picture that you're actually living in.
And I think that that's another self-accountability point on her end and on our end. It's like you can always tell a story in a way that somebody you know will tell you that you're right? And it's on you to give the full message. I can tell you something about somebody, and of course you'll be like, because I have omitted the details, or I have told you what, you know. And so I think it's difficult though, right? When you're mad about somebody else to be like, well, I did do this though. I did do this, by the way. But I think that when you're looking for comfort, whether it's from a relationship or a situation, the only way that you can really get it and really get sound advice is to sometimes give a full story. And like you said, I mean, I understand frustration when somebody has pissed you off, and especially in a romantic relationship, sometimes that person can get under your skin more than other people can. And you just want to talk about this one thing that happened. But I think that that's why it is so difficult, because one, I always say your friend's not going to forget, your family not going to forget, and you might forgive them, but it's going to be harder for your friends and family to do the same. But also, they can never see the person that you see, because it's so many small interactions that go into it, right? Like, okay, you did this thing to me, but you also get up in the middle of the night and when I'm having anxiety attacks, you know how to deal with that, and you are soft and gentle with me, and like, you know, or every morning before you leave for work, you make me coffee because you know I like that, and you leave it in the same space, or, you know, those small things that sometimes we take for granted, but as soon as somebody does one thing, it's like, ugh. But when you're telling a story, you're not going to think of all those little things to say, and it gets long-winded, becomes all of those things. But I agree, that's what makes it so difficult to look for validation in your decisions and stuff, and that's the hard part of adulthood. You really have to find a way to be okay with your decisions, to trust yourself, to trust your judgment and all that, because I don't think that I said this in the context of therapy. You go for an hour. There's no way I can tell you every detail that's made me. Even for a year with the same therapist going twice a week, there are still so many things that I just can't tell you so that you can understand all of me. So it's like, yes, there are pieces and you may say things that make me question myself, but at the end of the day, I'm the only one who has lived this life who can uniquely make a judgment based on all of the things, because I cannot verbalize every single small detail, you know. And so it becomes hard because it's like I want to get it out to somebody, and you need friends and you don't want to isolate from friends and relationships, but I agree there's no way to give a full picture.
Yeah, nah, not at all. Even in a lot of my bad stories, I think
like your personal bad stories.
Bad stories, I think relationships are meant to end on a bad note. There's a reason things don't work.
Period.
You don't want it to be terrible, because when you found it, you're like, oh, this shiny marble.
Right.
But then after a while, you're like, no, it's too shiny for me, man. I had to let it go. I got tired of, like, you know, taking care of the marble, wiping it down, everything else. I look back at a lot of my relationships now and who I was, and I say to my current partner, like, it was something. So her car got broken into yesterday, right? And I was in the bathroom when I got the call about the car getting broken into. And my first thing in my head was, you need me to come outside? Should I bring the vacuum cleaner? Do I need to bring the broom? And she was like, bring garbage bags, right? And I've never not been a person that's a plan of action or, hey, we have things to do. But I find it very fascinating how when life throws you curveballs, how willing you are, depending on who you are, to say, all right, what's the things that we need to do to hurry this process up? Because that must be extremely uncomfortable to discover someone has gone through my stuff. You get what I'm saying? And then for her, position-wise, who do I need to be that she can't be for herself? Because right now she needs to make calls. She needs to check out what's going on with the insurance. She needs to see, is there a deductible? She needs to see, did they take anything of value that was in the car? Did I leave anything of value in the car? She also has ADHD too. So when you said that, I was like, nah, I got it. And then what do I need to do to help with the cost in the future? Because that's going to be expensive, and we pay rent together. And I'd rather you not have this large bill that you're facing by yourself as your guy if I have it coming in. And I don't know if I would have ever thought I'd be able to be that person growing
Come
up.
on, acts of service. That's exactly what that is, and I love it. And I love it.
That's compassion and consideration, which is rare in this world.
A lot of people can't find that.
Oh, they can't.
You feel what I'm saying? Like,
that's
oh,
why
your car getting broken into? Oh, man.
That don't have nothing to do
I
with
wish
me.
it was better. That's
Literally thoughts and prayers.
I'm in the bathroom. I can't come out.
Yeah. and even when we were out there, I remember asking her, what time is it? Because I wanted to make sure, do I have enough time to help you out? We tape up the door so no one else can go through it. And at least we do everything we can for this situation before I go to work. Because once I go to work, you no longer have access to me to help out. And at least when you're back in the house, you go order some cupcakes, chill out, and just have the rest of your night. And it's your mom's birthday this week.
Oh, wow.
You get what I'm saying? So it was like a very bad weekend. Like, I think about these things that I do. And like, you know, we got the hugs out the way, thank yous and everything else, but I sometimes wonder, do people have access to other people in their lives that are willing to just do that without being asked, hey, can you do this thing for me?
I would say some do, some don't. A lot don't. And that's why, you know, when you talk about the hyper independence of the Black woman, a lot of us don't have that person, and so we've had to figure out, we can't even be sad. We got to jump into action and fix it, you know?
Yeah.
You know how I live my life.
Yeah, no, I do. That's why there's snacks in the fridge. I was like, nah, it's like, yo, when you pull up, don't,
And I forgot,
don't worry.
because
That's
I
what I
went
was
into
like.
independent mode. I was like, oh, yeah.
There's snacks here. You got, what is it? Greek yogurt?
Greek yogurt.
Cheese. What flavor is the cheese?
It's like cheddar or mozzarella.
Cheddar. That was like the most adorable shopping list I ever put together. I was like, I got you, fam. You don't get to be hungry here. Because I think there's a thing, you're welcome. There's a thing that if you're around me, you should at least be taken care of in the way that you would take care of yourself if you were actually thinking about yourself. And that's what I keep in mind. It's hard to do that, even for myself, because like once I'm on go mode, I'm not thinking about whether I'm thinking about, did I get it done? Did I do it correctly? How much work do we have left? Even this room, I spent 3 hours last night when I came back from work reorganizing my room and getting everything together because I realized the week had gotten so far away from me in terms of everything that I was doing that I was not taking care of the main space that we shoot in, and I was like, oh, this isn't gonna work. Yeah, so when Wolf canceled, I was out perfect. I was like, give me another hour and then we could sit down and have a good chat.
You know, I just had the same thought about the salon as I was doing my hair today. I was
Really?
like, there's stuff all over the place, and this is like my passion room. This is where I go in there at least 3 or 4 times a week. And I think it's a representation of like how my mind is scattered, just like how disorganized it is. Because the rest of my life, like if you go to work, if you go to my desk, everything is like in a space. They're like, oh yeah, that looks like Dr. Jones's desk because it's all in order. But my passion room is just a mess.
Yeah, there was no open space in this room at all when I came back home from work 4 a.m. last night. I was like, oh, a lot of work.
You did a good job because it looks like it always looks.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. I was scared. I was like, oh, I think this is good. I think this works. Everyone will be cozy when they pull up. What's your relationship with sadness?
My relationship with sadness. I think I was not given the space to feel my emotions as a kid.
And
like, you know, anger is disrespectful. And then if I'm sad, it's like, why are you crying? What are you sad about? Maybe I'll give you something to cry about.
I just see that one coming.
You know, and so like Chadli, I suppressed a lot for a long time and became disconnected, detached, numb, until the last relationship I was in. I just got to a breaking point. Like I thought that was going to be the secret key that unlocked all of my happiness, right? And I felt worse than I ever felt in my entire life. And so that's when I started going to therapy, and that unlocked a lot of the underlying, I'm going to call it depression. Like I probably was depressed for 15 or 16 years, if not longer. But like the 2.5 years I spent in therapy unlocked why I felt the way I felt and gave me permission to think how I thought about my upbringing and about my family. And so now I can easily acknowledge that I am sad, or that things are not going in the way that I want them to go, or that I'm irritated or frustrated. Like I actually had to look at a feelings wheel with my therapist and identify like, oh, I am overwhelmed, or I am frustrated, or I am angry. I felt like it was inappropriate for me to ever be angry. Like I could not ever say that I was angry before I went to therapy. But then I learned that it's okay, and actually anger is just the surface emotion. Usually there's like, you feel like you have been betrayed, or there's some injustice that has been pushed upon you. And so I think I'm happier than I've ever been. Well, let me rephrase that. Before recently, I was happier than I ever been, but now that I've added a new stressor, having a business, that's, you know, made me a little bit more, that's brought some things to the surface, I'll say that. And so I'm in therapy again, but I still would think that I'm not as detached or sad as I was for like the majority of my life.
That's
Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, no, that's big. I think my relationship with sadness was funny.
Funny?
Yeah, like if I was sad, I had to be funny.
Make a joke.
I
do that too sometimes.
Right? And it wasn't because I was avoiding sadness. I think I didn't, at an early age, have the proper people around me to deal with my sadness. And I wasn't willing to wait for them to figure it out. I had a lot of great people around me, don't get me wrong, between my parents and my family, my cousins and everything else. But like, you ever have the family member that's trying to talk to you about what's wrong with you, and then you feel that they keep changing the subject and they love talking to you?
Always.
And you're like, yo, why are we talking?
And then you just give up, kind of. You just shut down and talk about something else.
I'm just going to go do this other thing over here, and then we get back. Let's just act like we didn't have that talk. I think that's how I was as a family member and friend to a lot of folks. And then I think I started picking up on other people's sadness because I'm an empathetic person.
Yeah.
Like I remember when I was younger, my mom was like, hey, don't let people take advantage of your kindness because people are going to take advantage of you. And I remember hearing her say, they're going to.
Yeah.
And I was like, dang, if I start thinking everyone's going to take advantage of my kindness, I don't know if I'm going to be able to be kind to people that come into my life outside of the people you're afraid of. And if I'm ever going to be open with them. And I think at a certain point when my life was changed drastically in 2018, before I started everything that I did, I had to readjust my relationship with sadness. So I think I had a better relationship with jealousy than sadness, and then it switched over. Because I'm down for being jealous. Like, ooh, what are you jealous about? What's going on? Why are you so jealous? What's going on? Oh, you wish you were them? Why you wish you were them? Did you put in the work? And I think that's one thing about me that's important, is if I was jealous about something, I was more willing to ask, did I put in the work towards the thing that I'm jealous about, what others have or what I'm not, versus, well, why do they have it? And I think that's something that really defined me as a person, which is really important. Because, like, you're supposed to be jealous of people. Not like, wake up, can't wait to be jealous today, but more so, if you have that feeling, where is it coming from and what are you going to do with it? Like, being jealous of someone doesn't mean you have to blame them because they've had a head start on you or what it is that they've had. But I think you do have to acknowledge, well, did you ever put yourself in that position, or did you actually want that thing, or is it you see what success looks like on them or their joy and you just want it and you don't really want the work, you just want what they have. But by the time you get there, you're going to realize actually a lot of work went into getting there, and it's not as fun as it looked just because they have it. So I think when it comes to sadness, and not just crying, because sadness is actually much larger than just tears or being down about something. Sometimes sadness is the development of realizing the thing that you wanted or the thing that you have isn't what you thought it was going to be, and the perception of you catching up to what you thought it was and what it actually is. That middle point to me is what sadness usually is. And dealing with that, I came to realize, hey, it's not even that it's just okay to be sad, but you need to embrace what the sadness is and what it does to you. And you need to also think about the things that it affects. So, like, for example, I don't go out much because I'm busy. But being busy is a choice. So having a business, when you're busy, that's a choice, right? Going to the gym, all right, you're busy at the gym studying. You're busy studying. That means that you're going to have this little corner of things that you may not be doing, like going out on dates, having less ideas, reaching out to your friends to see, hey, can we get some food and just catch up? And getting back to those things that bring you joy kind of balance out the sadness of, oh, I miss we haven't seen each other because blah, 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 blah. But it's like, no, you made a choice. So not only is sadness necessary, but sometimes you've chosen the sadness that you have. How do you correct it so you're not always there in terms of the habits that you've built up? Yeah. I hope that got to the point. I know it's a lot of words, but that's how I
definitely.
think about it.
No, that makes sense, and I don't think that I have conceptualized it that way. But I feel like your perspective is very. It's not just a feeling; it is a process, and I think that I like the way that you conceptualize it because it's pragmatic, and there are ways to deal with it. Whereas I always conceptualize it as just like, with feelings, it's like with love. Love is a verb versus love is a feeling. Like, one just happens to you and one is a choice. And so I like the way that you described it or conceptualized it, because I felt like sadness is something that just happens to you. But when you make it more of a choice, that there are steps, that there are ways that I can deconstruct this feeling and then ways that I can move forward from it, I think that makes it more digestible to deal with.
Yeah.
Like platas.
Yeah.
Like
What's platas? Small plates? Is that platas? Did I say the wrong word? Right word?
Yeah.
I know. I just
You're
Spanish.
talking about like the
tapas.
Tapas.
Yeah, tapas. It's the platas. I said, wait, no. It's supposed to be something. Yeah, exactly. Platas.
Right.
I am aware there is a lot I don't know about. If you said it, must be a thing.
She tries to speak Spanish. She only has 4 words.
Yeah, that's it. It's the finest 4 words I have. It's always at the beginning of the conversation too.
Hola,
yeah.
¿Cómo estás? Adios. Muy bien, y
Ciao.
tú?
Gracias.
And I know how to say un
gracias. I be using the
poquito.
fuck out of a gracias. Yeah, ooh, little, okay, I
A
see.
little bit.
Lo siento, that's my favorite.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, sincere sorry though. Ooh.
Sincerely.
Yeah.
Not even just a little bit.
I'm
No, I
so
mean
sorry.
it. I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
Period.
I'm good for those, and that's it. Yeah, that's the whole list. I mean, muy, and then jugo, since that's my name in Spanish. That's about it. Yeah. Great vocab.
Yeah, it's enough to have a nice little conversation if you ever get stuck somewhere.
Yeah, the reason I wanted us to discuss sadness is I really appreciate your view. I don't know if I'd call it vulnerability though. I think I'd say your honesty on your journey about sadness. Because like when you explained it and when you said it, I was like, oh, I want to hear about your sadness now. And then when I heard about yours, I was like, all right, I should share. That's not fair to just ask two people about their relationship with it. And I think it's important to understand what your relationship with things are and what it isn't.
Yeah.
Right? Like, people may not have a relationship with anger or may not realize, oh, I have a really deep relationship with anger, but I don't realize that's me being angry.
Right.
I just always thought that was my reaction to things.
Right.
And then, like, there was just so much clarity in your words. So I appreciated that.
Thank you. And yours
clarity
too.
in yours too.
And yours as well. I think that for me, the most powerful aspect was understanding how differently. You know, like there are words that we've learned since we first learned how to speak and read, right?
Yeah.
Sad, happy, like basic words. And it's so interesting how we can all have a completely different conceptualization of them. Not even what they are like on a wide scale, but what they mean to us. And I kind of always assume everybody thinks of sadness the same way. Everybody, you know, so that's why with yours and, you know, talking about like jealousy and sadness or, and then yours is talking about how like, you know, it was another thing where you just weren't allowed to be or even, I think you brought up a good point, and you just glazed over it, but sadness and anger and disrespect and how all of those when you're a child are kind of rolled together. And it's like, again, these are human emotions. But I think that like it's comforting in a way. You know, we're all human beings, but we have such different stories, and we all have all of our experiences with anger, sadness, happiness, love, joy, whatever. It's all based on our own experiences, and you can't just make an assumption that we all have the same conceptualization of this. And I think going back to what you were saying earlier of the story with the car break-in, I think it's so important for us to have these conversations and for these types of things to happen because, like, you're an acts of service person and that's how you showed up. Somebody else might have been like, oh, let me buy you some food and send you some food, right? And because they might be more of a gift giver or whatever, you know? And sometimes people they don't mean harm by not, you know, but if that same person gave me a plate and was just like, you know, best of luck to you, like,
hey, at least you fed.
Right, exactly. At least you're fed.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I guess that's an act of service too. Or some people, right, like might just come. They're not gonna offer you. They're not gonna help you, but they'll sit there with you. And they might be, you know, theirs might be a quality time. So we just want to sit here together and be together. You know, and none of it is wrong. It's just all how we think we can show up. And I think it's so important to talk about our different views of sadness, our different views of what showing up in that situation looks like, because it's so easy to think that our view is like common sense, because it might be to us but it's not to other people. And sometimes, like, you know, your perspective made me pull some keys or some pieces that I will probably next time I feel sad I'm gonna use, you know. And I feel like we can all learn from so many situations if we allow ourselves to, if we allow our perspective to change, to grow, to shift ourselves, to expand. And I just feel like these conversations and hearing how different people handle different things and all that stuff, it allows me to continue to make sure that I'm always trying to approach situations doing that and not just being like, well, you didn't show up for me and you're wrong. Well, maybe you did, and maybe you did it in a different way than, you know, what I'm used to.
I think to your point too, like you referenced the love languages, and I think where sometimes people go wrong in relationships is that they try to love a person in the way
How
that
they want to be loved.
want to be loved or what they feel comfortable doing. But you have to love a person in the way that they need to be loved, right? Otherwise, you could call it love, but is it really like, if the person doesn't feel loved, then what are we talking about? Like it doesn't really matter, right? So I think really relationships should incorporate all love languages, right? Like acts of service and quality time and what are the other three?
Physical touch.
Physical touch. Like it should include all of it. It shouldn't be just like, oh, this is my main way and this is what you have to accept.
At least a willingness to show it in different ways. Like I'm not really a physical touch person. Actually, it's so funny because in my friendships, like I am the hugging friend who always leave you a hug when I see you, like blah blah. But I'm like a little bit less like that in relationships.
But if you talk about sex life, like people, I mean,
Because, some men, I'm sorry, but as soon as you hug them, they be trying to, and it's just like, not today.
But maybe you would be a physical touch person if the men weren't so.
If I didn't,
like,
exactly. And also, adults need sex, and so like in a relationship, it's like, how can I show up a little bit better with that and not just be on edge? Because I feel like every time you touch me, you're looking in my eyes, you about to be ready to go.
That's problematic. Can men be less creepy? Like,
can they leave?
That actually just came up in this episode. There's this new show that I'm watching on YouTube. You remember the black anchor, her and her husband that are famous in DC? They used to do, they'll do like their anchor voices.
You're talking about this news lady?
Yeah, she's not on the news anymore.
No, but that's her Instagram thing, yeah.
So, thank you. I appreciate that. So they have a show that they've been doing on YouTube, and it's fascinating because, like, I really like hearing about what's going on in people's lives background-wise. Like, the business and everything you gave us, that's great. I want to hear about the personal relationship stuff. And they were interviewing this lady who's a sex therapist. Shan is her name. It's Shan something. Light skin, her and her husband, they've been making content for a while, and I feel she's made, like, the space when it comes to sex, women's sex in particular, like in terms of orgasms, expressing stuff in relationships, exploring who you are, which I think is a space that's not filled correctly on social media. Like, sex doesn't have to be about sex, if that makes sense, right? It's supposed to be about the process. What is someone looking for? What conversations are you guys not having? Why are you not having these conversations? And what does it look like to actually hear your partner out and not just what your partner can give you?
Right.
And she was talking about her relationship with her husband since she's had a child, and she was like, my relationship with sex has changed drastically since having a kid, where sometimes I don't want to be touched, or I don't even want us to think about sex because of everything that I've gone through, and that's not a bad thing. I realize that there's certain things I need from my partner that will put me in a mood. And I remember she brought up, she was like, simply him rubbing my back puts me in the mood. That was never who I was or anything else like that. But now I know if he does that and he cleans up the house, or we clean up the house together, I have one less thing to think about, and that makes it easier for me to be in the mood. And when you were talking about, men doing too much when it comes to hug, I'm the hugger in everyone's group, but I don't hug people because I came to realize you guys are hugging me because you can't hug other people safely. And that's heartbreaking, because that means that people aren't just hugging each other as a form of appreciation, which that's what a hug is supposed to be about. Hey, I'm glad you're here. I care. I'm glad you're okay. It's nice to see you. I'm glad you got to see tomorrow. Let me embrace you, because that's hopefully what my family gave me. And when I hear things like that, I'm just like, wow, we really just fucking up out here for fun.
And that must be why I'm so comfortable hugging my girlfriends and stuff like that, because I don't feel a threat. I feel safe.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like, wow, I've never, that was powerful.
And I will say, like, I usually don't hug men either because of that same thing. Like, maybe they'll get the wrong idea. But when I first met Juice, I didn't know Juice. I just walked up and said, "Do you want to play Uno?" And he opened his arms and started giving me a hug. And I'm like,
it was a great hug.
Know me?
It was a great hug. No, it was a
and it was a great hug. It was a platonic hug. It meant nothing, but it felt good. Like, it was, I mean, he's a great hugger.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then I also stopped hugging people because I realized I was giving way too much in a hug. So, like, there's
Like, you don't do the half, you be going in.
He
like
gives a tight hug, and it's long too.
Well, I'll do the half if I don't know you or just perfect vibe. So, like, folks who meet me at my other jobs, I'll ask them, "Hey, would you like a hug
Is
or a
this
handshake?"
okay? Yeah.
Because it's like, you should have an option. We don't have to hug each other. I'm going to listen to who you are, not, oh, that person didn't hug me. They must not know who I am. Nah, it's just a hug. If they want it, that's great. If they don't want it, that's good, because now you have a good start because you respected their boundaries. And that's nice to be able to, like, talk to someone who respects your boundaries, and then you leave, and we don't have to think about anyone in a negative light after.
Yeah.
Hugging was embedded in me in my childhood. Like, my mother would show me love by, like, hugging me super tightly.
Yeah.
Like, And it'll be so uncomfortable because at a point you can't breathe.
Mm-hmm.
But then I don't want anything less because then I think you don't care about me. Like if I hug somebody else, a stranger, and they don't hug me tight, then I'm like, we could have skipped that hug. Like I really don't need it.
Mm-hmm.
So when Juice gave me a hug and it was a real hug, and it was like, oh wow, this is great. You know?
I never knew.
This is
That's
sick.
nice.
Yeah.
I'm glad I heard you correctly. Yeah, but I'm big on that because it's like, you know, people's body language. People show you a lot with their body languages, but you have to actually like care about a stranger to pay attention to their body language too. That's like really important. That's why it's like handshake, hug. Do you want church hug? We could do a half hug.
Right.
It don't gotta be a whole hug. Or do you want to not hug? We could not touch.
Right.
That's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
You
Right.
know. And then like, yeah, but that's sad that you guys have to
Think about that.
be so guarded at all times.
And I think also with you even talking about like you hugging your mom as a child, and Jordy and I have talked about this, but I am very like, in my adulthood now, I'm having to relearn how I feel about things because I always operated the way I felt like I was supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I didn't want people to hug me, but as a child, you don't say that. That's rude, right? Going back to like what's respectful and what's not. And so I think even now, like if anybody, even though I said it makes me uncomfortable in relationships and stuff, and I think relationships are different because like we do know each other, but a stranger, I would always feel obligated, you know, like I don't feel like I can say, no, I really don't want to hug today. I don't really, I feel like it's something that just like, if someone wants to hug you, you have to do it. And so maybe that's like another thing too, of like, because even with you all talking about the depth of what it means to you, it's just a thing to me. Like it just doesn't like, it's kind of just like, I could hug somebody and really forget if I hug them. Like when you were talking about you hugged her, I'm like, oh, I wonder if I gave him a hug when I came in here. I don't remember. You know, because it's just like,
You gave a handshake. And I noticed that you gave a handshake and he hugged me. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I was like, look, that's her language. That's cool.
And it's funny because I'm actually normally a hugger, but I think it's just like I always go off of other people rather than me being like the initiator either way.
Yeah.
But I am different with men too in general. But yeah, I just feel like with hugs, it was just something that like if someone wants to hug me, I have to hug them back. You know, and I never really thought much about it, but like thinking back now, like it was probably some people, and I thought of it when you were talking about your mom, because I was thinking of times when I was mad at my mother and she tried to hug me, I wasn't allowed to say I didn't want to hug. And so like then you're bulldozing my boundaries too, because like, you know, or when they just try to make up with you but they don't apologize but just try to be cool with you again. And I feel like even one of my friends recently, we had got into it, and I don't really get into it with people, and I think it's because I'm kind of just, I don't be caring. Yeah, exactly. I'm kind of detached. But we got into it, and his way of apologizing was, he's a gay man. Like, okay, bring it in. Like, you know, I don't have time for this. Like, you don't have to. Then I give him a hug. And it's just like, it didn't fix the problem or whatever, but it took me back to, but it took me back to a childhood when it's like, you know, when one of those people, I don't know if it was like a power thing or whatever, but I wasn't really allowed to be angry. And if you want to hug for me, it's going to be the end of the world. If I, you know, like I just have to do it. And so, yeah, it's interesting to see how differently people like conceptualize hugs.
That's a slippery slope. You're doing things physically that you don't want to do.
Exactly. And I think that sometimes when you think of little girls and how we learn that our bodies are not our own, it's the small things like that continue to add up and continue to get more extreme.
Yeah.
And then we feel like a less of a sense of our autonomy or the right to exercise it. And then you just kind of let things happen to you, you know, and you think about like consent, right? Or about those people who they're not confident enough to say no because they feel like they have to because I'm in this space or whatever. But you know, they don't really want to, but it's almost like they're yelling it from the inside, but they can't get it out because they feel like I have to do whatever someone else wants me to do. So it can definitely be a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Question. I have 2 questions for you.
Yes.
Profession-wise, what do you do?
I'm an attorney.
What's that like?
So I love being a lawyer generally because I like the law. I do not like the way that I'm practicing it now. And there are some aspects of. So I'm a corporate attorney. I work with like health systems, life sciences companies on getting new drugs approved, new devices for hospitals, like stuff like that, and deals to acquisition. Because from the corporate side, you always must do some acquisitions. But
sounds like a lot of writing.
Yeah, a lot of contracts. Yeah, a lot of writing and reading. And I'm in big corporate law, so, and that's important because it means that we work crazy hours sometimes, and our schedules are not our own. We make a lot of money, but like life is just not really our own.
Mm-hmm.
So I said I do like being an attorney because like even in my job now, I get to work on some huge things. Like right now I'm on some high impact litigation suing the DC government, Child Protective Services, for making children's family members take them in, not paying them, because they could become licensed as foster parents, even if it's your same family member, so that the government will have to pay you. Instead, they ask you to take these kids and get filed for custody in court, and they don't tell you that you could be getting money for it. So now there's this person who just took in these kids, 4 kids from somebody. It's an extra bill. You can't afford them. They're all, and it's so many. It's difficult to do that, and you're not giving the kids the mental health services they deserve. You're not giving any of those things. And so we are in some impact litigation doing that, right? And that's something that's huge that on my own I wouldn't be able to do. Where I've worked on some huge pro bono cases about police brutality and things of that sort. And so my job being such a huge international law firm, I get to do things like that, and I really like that. But the aspect of my time never really being my time is difficult. I don't have children, but I do want to have a life of my own. And it's like I'm 29, like I can put in the grind time, but like at any given point, like I was working before this, I'll work today later on. Like anytime they call me, I am working. For the last month and some, I've been working 7 days a week. And it's always something. And I think it goes back to me already feeling like and I start to think, did I become an attorney because I was just perpetuating the part of me that needed to take care of everybody, or who was the fixer of everybody? And a part of it, it's worse. It's compounded in my job because nobody cares how I'm doing. They just need this from me. They just need this from me. They just need this. Even for some of the pro bono and high impact litigation that's like, doing things for people. Yeah, I am having to spend hours and hours of my time. I'm not getting paid for it. You might leave with a check of damages and stuff. I'm not getting a dime, and I'm actually giving my resources to be here and to do this and to, and it's like, what's in it for me? Because it's not about me. It's about me saving someone, and that's in the space and the capacity that I'm doing.
She doesn't even get a lunch break.
No, we don't. I just, just vibes.
Food.
Sometimes food is just not something that I can even think about.
I like that for you.
But yeah, so it's difficult, and it's like, one of those things, like a moment of sacrifice for long-term benefit. Like there have been so many benefits from my job. I mean, I am a girl from a single parent household, like I said, who didn't have a family who was really able to financially support me, and now I have a house, everything I need, I can take care of me. And maybe that's my own trauma response, but I always wanted to be able to, if I didn't have anybody to come rescue me, to rescue myself. And I live that life now. Like I can do the things that I want for the first time in my life. And so, those are benefits as well, but it's difficult. It's also heavy because you see how you learn how things are supposed to be, and you see how they are in real life. Like you learn about people's rights and stuff, right? Like if a police officer comes up to you and asks you to search your stuff, you don't have to let them. But I'm also Black, and I understand that, well, that's suspicion now if you say no, because why? And it shouldn't be. It's not supposed to be, but it happens if you run, right? Because people are scared of the police. There's generational trauma there. But if you run in some states, that gives suspicion that if they chase you, then they can now. They have reasonable suspicion that they can, check or frisk or like. And so I think learning all of this from the aspect of being a woman, from the the law wasn't created by a woman. It was not created by Black people. It was not, and so I think learning about how it's supposed to work and seeing how it works for people like me makes me sad. Seeing the criminal justice system and how it works, criminal injustice system, it makes me sad. And being an empath, I think, and having a hard time with boundaries, and again, separating my stuff from other people's stuff. There have been times where I have been biting my lip not to cry, and it was not about me, and so I said, you better not, and I did not. But it's just like sometimes it really breaks my heart to see how our worlds can be, yet all these laws are saying that we don't live this way. I'm seeing how we actually live, and so I think that has been a difficult thing that I've had to work with. And how can I separate? How can I create some space between my work so that I'm strong enough to do this work, because this is heavy. Seeing and hearing people's stories and trying to fix it for them. I mean, I can get you a check maybe, but I cannot dismantle by myself. I can't dismantle the societal issues that will continue to make these things happen. And that breaks my heart as the little girl who always knew no matter what, I can fix things for people. Because the law teaches you how powerless you are. And, you know, you're sad for a minute, you keep pushing forward, you keep trying to make change, and change comes incrementally, but then you see things like a Supreme Court that's hacked, and people's human rights getting rolled back. And now being poor, being criminalized, where you can't sleep on the street or you might be arrested, where else you gonna go? You know, and seeing those things. But, you know, you just keep pushing forward. And I'm trying to now learn how to do that and separate me needing to be everybody's hero from me as an attorney doing what I can and knowing that my best is enough.
Remember I told you that she's very good at speaking?
Yeah.
She basically summarized everything I feel about medicine.
Yeah, and that's why I feel like when we talk about it, because it's important, right? And they need us, and sometimes we don't have it in us. And us, it's painful for us. And it's like we don't want to leave them, right? Because these people need us, but it's hurting us to stay in these spaces where we can't fix it. Like
I created a nonprofit to fix it, but
yeah.
I mean, maybe I should create more boundaries. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. I think, I was talking to Jory about it because I think that, like, our vices are just our vices, no matter kind of what you were saying earlier, but no matter the form that they take on. And I feel like now her nonprofit, it's doing so much. And we had a conversation once, and we were talking about not attendance, but basically attendance and how many people she can reach. And I said, well, how many like is good enough for you if it's less than 100? So I said, well, so if you change 50 kids' lives, no. And she started crying, and she was serious. Like, she doesn't feel like her work will be good enough if she can't create change at a large scale. And I told her, girl, some of these things you don't think that other people try to and have chipped away at it, but you taking on all the pressure to be the person who changes someone's life when there are all these social constructs that are blocking you from doing that in so many different ways. You can't live that way. And I was telling her, it's not that I don't believe in your dream, because I do, and it's not like I don't believe in your power as a person and your passion, because I do, but taking on all that pressure and thinking unless I create nationwide change in this generation now, then my work was not successful, or I wasn't good enough. Like that, you cannot live that way. Because it's like your heart bleeds for others, but you cannot take that on.
You remember I said that you gotta be careful where you bleed?
Yes.
Yeah, that's and that goes for all of us, not just Joy. That's like all of us across the board.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to just make it a you thing. Like, we about to talk about it. I was gonna say, I don't want us to pile up.
We had this conversation before.
Yeah. Before you guys pull up, like 20 minutes before you guys got here, I got a text message from somebody that I interviewed that's gone through manic episode after manic episode after manic episode. His first extreme manic episode happened in college, and then he ended up graduating late, and we basically broke up his interview into 3 parts of I wanted someone to give a description of what does mania look like from the person that's experiencing it. What do you remember of your loved ones? What do you remember of those times and things being in blotches? And he hit me up today. He's never once watched any of the episodes that we put out. And he texted me today out the blue. And I remember he was actually in rehab for a breakdown that he had mania-wise recently 2 months ago. And anytime he's above water, he texts me. And then when he's back down, I'm just like, hey, whenever he reaches out.
Yeah.
And I was like, I read that before getting in the shower. I was like, I can't digest this because this would break me before doing the interview today. Because it's like, sometimes, and this is not gonna sound right, it's not always are the people doing well. Sometimes it's, did I actually do what I said I was gonna do with the people who I talked to and share their stories with me? And I remember him saying in the text message, as you guys were talking about this, I remember the one part, he was like, you really do approach the conversations with candor, and I appreciate that, because that's something I didn't know I needed while going through my struggle. And I said, damn, why you gotta say that to me right before you say it?
You want me to cry now?
I was like, all right, I'm gonna take this shower. I'm gonna read this after. So, what's this solid creator?
Yeah.
But yeah, nah, take your time with yourself.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I'm in therapy, guys. I mean,
take your time with yourself.
I'm not blaming you, Chadli, but that conversation may have been the beginning of why, like, because I felt like, oh, I found a solution. I'm going to create a nonprofit that solves all the world's problems. And then that's like a realistic conversation that's like, you probably won't be able to solve all the world's problems. And I'm like, so then why am I doing this? Why am I in medicine? Why, like, you know, like it starts to spiral, so.
You know, the best way to solve the world's problems is to solve a problem.
That's the thing.
Because like, everyone has a problem. So what I think about from my approach is, if somebody comes to you remember that text message I sent you about women?
A couple days ago.
Yeah, the whole apartment search.
Mm-hmm.
One of my best friends going through it, right? And her going through it, this is her 5th time since I've been her friend and seeing her go through it in a different relationship. And this goes back to, be careful not to make the same mistakes in different places in your life. And anytime I bring the name up to my girl, she like clutches, like, oh, it's about to be bad. And I said, you know, I can't realistically put my name or my credit score on the line for this friend because, hey, my parents told me you should never share that with people. You gotta keep that to yourself. That's just one of them things. Shit I love when it comes to that, right? But B, I care about you so much that thought comes in my head that there's a part of me that has to say, hey, you don't get to do that for that friend. Sorry. Because you want to help them, but you've seen their partners crash the car in each one of their relationships. You've seen the partners mess something up having to do with the person's housing in the different relationships. You've seen the habit. So even if you do something good for your friend or you help them out, and this isn't going to be the first or the last, this is going to happen again. So all you can do is do your best and let them do what they're doing, because change has to start with them.
Mm-hmm.
So when I hit you up, I was like, hey, thank you.
And I felt great that I even had those.
Yeah,
That's not part of my job. I actually was sitting next to a psychologist. I said, hey, do you know any places? Mm-hmm. They said, no, I'll have to get back to you. And then I was like, oh, I remember. I went to a networking event, and this girl told me that she worked at a place for DV people. Yeah. And so I gave you those. So that was great. Thank you.
Yeah. But you were there for me, and you know what you did for me that day? You solved a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And that's what our jobs are. We don't. Yeah. There's gonna be a lot that we get wrong as we try, and there are gonna be some things that we get right that people need, and that's the balance of, we started the business because the world was a lot more disappointing before we started trying, so we wanted to see more happen at a faster rate.
Yeah. I saw something on Instagram this morning that kind of resonated with me and reminded me of you too. But it's like, children who grow up in environments with trauma, they learn to be driven by whatever is happening externally. And so they don't really see the future. They just are constantly reacting to like whatever is going on with them. And it hit home. It's like, that's basically what I'm doing. Like, I'm never going to be satisfied until my environment stops triggering me.
And I feel like a lot of us, and sometimes we don't boil it down to, but we never feel enough. We don't feel like us just being here is enough, and it is. So you just having an event, you doing one person's hair, you like, it's all, if you don't do anything else, you just being here is enough. And I think that there are so many kids who got to learn that, and there were, on the other side, there were a lot of us who learned that we had to produce to be enough. We had to make ourselves useful to the world around us. And I think it's a lot of black people. Like, we all want to save the world. To be 100% honest, and I told you this, we didn't create a lot of this. Like, tapping on black people to solve racism is ridiculous, because we are not the people who, so we can protest all we want, but it takes some people at the top of the power structure to pull back. They are the people, like, even I was having a conversation about, it was this girl from law school, it's a white girl, and like I said, I'm in big law, and she was going into public interest at the time, and I was in a clinic, so we were helping people get health insurance, or like if they were supposed to get like Social Security disability, we did an appeal so that they could get their money back, whatever, public interest clinic. And so she basically was like, anybody going into big law is a shitty individual who doesn't have a soul. Oh, I ate her up. Do you realize the privilege you have in saying that? Because guess what? You can afford to, after undergrad and law school, go and take a $30,000, $40,000 job. And do you want to know why? Because it's slave money, actually. So let's start there. But also because of the privileges that some people don't have. Some of us can't eat. And guess what I'm not going to do? Now, if you want to help the world, you are going to find a way no matter where you are. And that's first of all. Like I said, now I'm able to do this specific litigation and get back in this way by utilizing where I am. But also, like, you don't understand. I don't want to be another black woman who brings these kids who have to work harder than they should, who don't get to be children, because I'm out trying to save everybody else and not even pouring into the kids who I am responsible for being here. No, I'm not doing that. I didn't work hard to do that. You know, I don't want my child to have to, I want them to understand the value of money and to be empathetic and to be conscious, not only intelligent but conscious. But also, I'm not working this hard to try to save everything for everybody else and let them struggle. So how is a way that I can make money so that I can be okay and that my children can be okay, who, again, I am responsible for bringing into this world, and I can find ways to help the world as well. But you just sitting there that if it doesn't look this specific way, and if I don't go to this job, this clinic making $30,000, then I'm just a shitty person who doesn't care about people. How dare you say that? And how dare you not acknowledge your privilege to be able to make those assumptions about people? So I say everybody way in law school, you do it, you know, and like you'll see me there helping to do you do it, white people, because you can, you know, and people who grew up in wealth, you do it. All these people who are on the top of the power structure, you do it. And there will be people at the bottom who will help you, who will, you know, we can all mobilize together. But for you to expect people who are queer folks who were discriminated against, minorities, like women, to be the ones leading to like dismantle our oppression, how does that make sense? Like, that's like me being in handcuffs and me supposed to use my hands to unhandcuff myself that are in handcuffs. Like, no, you're at the top of the power structure. You do it. You lead it. Yeah. And we have to stop feeling bad when we can't sit here. Because, again, using the handcuff analogy, you're going to feel like, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not trying hard enough because you can't get your handcuffs off. Baby, you were never meant to. And so, like, you know, even if you can squeeze your handcuffs off somehow, you bleeding, you cut up, but you get it out, just because you can't, you still don't have the key to get mine off. And just because you can't do that doesn't mean that you are a failure or your work is in vain. But it's just like we can't individually dismantle these problems that we didn't create and that are so much bigger than us and that are completely intentional.
Yeah.
So.
That was some ball. Okay, I just want to let that be known.
So,
she's good for a read.
Clearly, because like, play with somebody else. Don't play with me.
I'm definitely looking forward to just having more conversations and sit downs and stuff like that. I just want to let you know you're not just very smart, you're very aware, and I think your perspective is very important and needed for a platform like this, because like I think about a lot of stuff that I do and I'm like, you know, we had that suicide scare that happened a couple of months ago, I think at this point, and like finding out why does this suicide hotline have a bot that people are talking to instead of a person? Why are the resources that we're giving people being met with, well, do you have insurance? If you don't, we can't help you. You're on your own, and just other things like that. And I think there's like a very large discussion when it comes to the legal side and mental health and how it's handled and how it's pitched and everything else. And like a lot of these companies, to my knowledge, I feel like they're getting away with so much of, we don't have to take care of our workers. They're getting away with, well, if you work for the government, depending on what branch you're in, why are you in therapy? You don't have to legally tell them, but when they find out you're in therapy for something, there's just a certain amount of jobs that you can't let your employer know what's going on with you, period. Because they'll use it against you. HR is really not your friend.
No, they're not. They are to protect the company. That's one thing.
And I tell folks that all the time. I mean, I experienced it personally, vicariously through my friend, and that whole breakdown that she went through with her last job, the same one who's the reason this whole platform exists. And I remember how HR handled things, and I remember as she was slowly losing it, thinking, people told me if you have issues, you should go to HR. They told her if she has issues, she should go to HR. And HR did nothing. All they did was keep track.
Oh no.
They kept
And a lot of
track
times they make it
cutoff.
worse.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
And I was like, nothing actually happened. You guys just moved people from one side of the room to another, and shit hit the fan. And when stuff hit the fan, what do? You let people go because you're hired to protect the company. And it's like, all right, well, what exactly is an employee? What exactly is HR? And what's the benefits of working outside of being paid? Because you can't pitch, well, we're a family or we want to make these impacts.
Oh my God.
But you're fucking people over
That
left
you
to right
don't
that you
care,
actually work with. So what are we really doing? Let's get into it. So,
What are
you
we
know,
doing?
I
those
think,
are combos.
I mean, I don't know if this is unique to medical education, but they do have these EAPs or employer assistant or employee assistant programs where they will provide you with 5 free sessions of therapy.
That's only for certain. We have it too. Like they do it for doctors, they do it for lawyers, acknowledging that we probably see a lot of trauma.
But you realize, like, you can't get everything done in
5
sessions.
And
Like,
the 5, who knows if you don't get them. One might be this month, they can't see another 6
Right,
weeks.
yeah.
The 5 is a true warm up. That's
Yeah.
it. The 5 is really a test for, do I like this person I'm sitting down talking to? That's all.
it.
That's all that
That's
really
it.
is. Do I like you enough to maybe want to open up about the can of
Right.
tuna that I had that I didn't enjoy 2 days ago?
Right.
That's
The EAP therapist I had was horrible. Like, she says, like, she
Yeah.
was totally insensitive and like tried to rush me along. I think my healing process.
Yeah.
Where it was
That's
just
the
like, yeah, I
numbers
don't
right
really want to talk to you again.
And some of them
She's like,
don't
"I'm
like
not
listen.
enough."
Like you would just have told them something and you could tell they didn't listen because they'll ask you the same thing you just told them.
Yeah.
And that makes, you know, if people have trauma around not being seen or heard, that can really compound that. Like a bad therapist can really do some damage. And again, I think of it kind of like a public defender, for example. Sometimes they're just overwhelmed. They have so many people that they are trying to provide care for that they cannot provide quality care for each person. And I think that that's a larger issue as well. But it's just like the impact is like you are enforcing some of the difficult, you know, feelings that I'm having.
Yeah.
And even to what you were saying regarding the infrastructure around suicide, I had someone, and she knows about this, but who means a lot to me, wanting to commit suicide and just refusing to want to be here. And so I was calling, 988, all the hotlines and stuff, and basically they said if this person is adult, they don't want to be here, we can't do anything. So like I had to go to the courthouse and get get this person declared as, because you know, then you're an adult, you have your own autonomy once again. And so it's like they have to be found as, you know, unable to make decisions for themselves, and that's only for 72 hours. So what can really be done in that time? But it's just like I called so many places. They do have a lot of community centers and stuff, but they will tell you, like, and they told me verbatim, yeah, we have limited resources and we'd rather use them on people who still have a fight to be here. So if they don't want to be here, if they won't agree to their care.
And this is in the state of Maryland.
State of Maryland.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, and I do understand, obviously from a legal perspective, we are adults. We do have autonomy. But for me to be saying that this person, then it's a tragedy afterwards, right? And everybody's like, oh, well, what could we have done? You literally told me. I literally told you what this person's about to do. Mm-hmm. And you're like, well, if they don't want to be there, let them die.
That's crazy.
Yeah, no, that's it. That you just translated it clearly. I feel you.
And you feel helpless. I mean, I'm sure the person, of course, the person who's suicidal feel helpless.
It reinforces what they already think.
Exactly.
Like,
no one cares.
Yeah.
But even the people who are fighting for them, when they don't have the strength to fight for themselves, we all feel helpless because what can we do?
Mm-hmm.
Like, because, you know, for people who want to be here, depending on what is the reason, it's no amount of money that you can give them. It's no amount of, they just want to not feel whatever is the source of their pain.
Yeah.
And I can't do it by myself, and I'm trying to reach out to resources to help people be here, and they like, well, if they done given up, we done given up on them too. And it's just like,
that's what I was thinking about when you were talking about the law and mental health. Like, the police are the people that come and get the person and take them to the hospital. It's like,
now they do have a lot, like in Maryland, they have a trained team for that. So they don't come in police uniforms.
Oh, okay.
They may come in a car, but like you sit in the person sits in the front of the car.
Oh, okay.
They're trained very well. Because let me tell you, you know, people who are suicidal, they're agitated, they get angry sometimes or whatever. But these are plainclothes people who tell you upfront, hey, we just want you to be here.
Okay.
And they walk you out very nicely. I'm about to cry because they talk to you very nicely. And it's like some of these suicidal people, again, are in pain, so they're so mean to these people. But it it was important because that's what policing should be, right? There's no reason why someone is having a mental health breakdown they end up shot. Like these person is in pain, or could be schizophrenic, could be whatever, but they're black, so they're scary, so you shoot them. Like, that's not what it should be. And these are the most critical times of people's lives. And so it was, thankfully, I got to see it done in a way that it was done well, despite the person being angry with them and cursing them out and all that stuff, and the way they took it and were so kind and graceful. That's what it should be, you know? That's what it should be. And I think so much of policing really is dealing with breakdowns and mental health issues.
Yeah, so we got that versus like the 12-year-old that I saw who's autistic, who was having a mental health emergency, and the first response was to arrest him.
And he was
handcuffs.
Black. Of course.
Black, Anacostia, 12 years old.
Of course.
He has his doctor advocating for him. He has other people. There's like I don't know what you call it, like a rehab or like some type of psychotherapy center that's actually in front of us, and the people who work there come out and say, hey, you should probably not restrain him, he's agitated, that's going to make it worse. But like nobody can hear him. They put him in the back of a police car. Like the approach was just so much different in Maryland, which is not that far away from DC, for a grown adult than it was for a child.
But then also, what was his name? I think Elijah McClain, and I cannot think of what state he was in. I want to say he was actually in Minnesota, but he was the boy who, I'm sure you saw it, the black child who was killed by the police too. And he said, what's wrong? I'm just a little bit different. And he was also on the spectrum. And there was a public outcry about that because they don't understand that, right? Like, people do not understand.
In the cold or the snow or something like that at the time?
I think so. I'm not sure about that, but I remember he was outside and then he was like, "Oh, you're hurting me. I'm just different." Like, I'm not, and he wasn't like, and it's just like, they don't people do not. Kimberly Crenshaw coined the term intersectionality, and people do not. And to me, it doesn't make sense why it's so hard to understand. But they don't understand. They don't, and that's the thing. They don't.
Yeah, that's all.
But okay, you're already black. Then you're black and on the spectrum too, which people don't understand. Then you might be, in your case, black and on the spectrum and poor. All of these things just compound and make your experience in society more and more difficult. And those people who, again, can't even deal with one aspect of your identity that is marginalized, they like, oh no, because going back to what we started talking about, they already see you as unsafe because you're black. And then you're unsafe more because you're on the spectrum, so you're erratic, so they can't predict your behavior. And then you're having a meltdown too, and then you're poor as well, so you probably don't even care, so they think, oh, well, you just gonna go out acting crazy because you don't have anything to lose. It's awful. It's awful.
Yeah. Well, this has been another episode of Mental Health Monday. Appreciate everybody for pulling up. Like, subscribe, share.
And
thank you for coming on. Comment. Thank you. Thank you for pulling up. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did I introduce myself at the beginning? I feel like you told me to. Oh, okay, good.